So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in colour, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day our producer Louis had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy if a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we could text ya whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the track extra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and welcome to another episode of On the Track Extra. Those of you who are regular viewers will know already that every Wednesday evening at 6:30 and every Saturday afternoon at 3 we bring you a miscellany, if you will, of hard science, weird shit, and surreality. Do you know what surreality is? Well, why don't you ask the cat?
Hello, my name is Lilith Tinkerbell and I'm a very good girl. I just want to tell you a bit about the history of surrealism. Surrealism is a cultural movement that developed in Europe in the aftermath of World War I, in which artists depicted unnerving, illogical scenes and developed techniques to allow the unconscious mind to express itself. Its aim was, according to leader Andre Breton, to resolve the previously contradictory conditions of dream and reality into an absolute reality, a super reality or surreality. It produced works of painting, writing, theatre, filmmaking, photography and many other media.
Before we get on to the main subject of the show this week, which is mammoths, I want to show you this story, which was sent to me by my friend and friend of the show, Daisy Swann, in Germany. It's a fox with 2 legs that was filmed in Ilkeston, Derbyshire, at the beginning of this year. And the fantastic thing about it is the way that it is adapted to having only half the number of legs that it should have, and seems to get on very well. I agree with Mike Dilger, who, speaking on BBC Radio Derby on January the 5th, said, "It's nature conquering all. It's beautiful." I looked at the footage yesterday. It's difficult. I think it's probably a genetic abnormality or disorder, so it probably happened from birth rather than injury. The reason I think that is because it is so adept. I mean, its poise and its balance and its control, it's astonishing. Mike went on to say that when an animal loses one hind leg, it can cope relatively well, but losing a foreleg is much harder for an animal to live with. But he continued, "This fox, however, has lost both legs, and the fact that it's looking so confident and so able tells me that it probably happened from birth. It's an amazing survivalist story. The fox looks in a really healthy condition. As far as I'm aware, the fox hasn't been seen again since, but I'll let you know if I hear any more on the story. Thank you very much indeed to Daisy for sending it, and please, love, keep up the good work, because I find the things that you send me totally fascinating." And now on to the main subject of today's show. Richard and I, last time he was down, ended up discussing mammoths. I don't know why the subject came up, how the subject came up, or whatever, but I found the discussion very interesting. But before we started to talk about mammoths, we spoke for a while about rhinoceri. I've always been fascinated by the 3 species of Asian rhino. And of course the Javan and Sumatran rhinos are two of the most endangered large mammal species on Earth. But there are cryptozoological aspects to both species, and there's a possibility that both species can be found in places they're not supposed to be found. So first of all, Javan rhino. What do you think the chances are that it can be living anywhere outside that tiny national park on the east coast of Java?
If it's anywhere else, it's going to be in Burma, because because it's been shut off from the rest of the world. It's so poorly explored. It wouldn't surprise me that the Javan rhinoceros is hanging on with relic populations in Burma. There are stories about it surviving in Sumatra, but I've never met anybody who claims to have seen one.
They were found again in 1988 after a gap of about 40 years in Vietnam, weren't they?
There was a tiny population in Vietnam, but almost as soon as they were found, they were wiped out by poachers.
Is there any chance there are any more in Vietnam or what, the old French Indochina, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos?
Possibly. I mean, the northern white rhino in Africa was declared extinct, but Forrest Galante went looking for it, and just before the big COVID lockdown, which sort of put paid to his expedition. But he talked to witnesses and found tracks which suggest that the northern white rhino in Africa might still be around.
Well, from what I remember, there have been sightings claimed of the northern white rhino by fairly senior politicians in the South Sudanese government. I don't know if you'd heard of that one.
No, I haven't, but let's hope it's correct. I've always thought a melanatoka, the killer of elephants, is probably a rhinoceros.
Well, the Asian rhinos, all three of them, are semi-aquatic, aren't they?
Yes, particularly the Indian and Javan rhino, they spend lots of time in water. And the weird thing is, when they attack enemies, when they fight with their tusks. They tend to bite rather than gore, like the African rhinos do. The Sumatran rhino is a little law unto itself. It's the closest living relative to the prehistoric woolly rhino, and it's the hairiest of the rhinos and the smallest. And unlike the other Asian rhinos that only have one horn, it has two horns like an African rhinoceros.
What do you think about the claims that aren't actually written up, but in my second editions of On the Track of Unknown Animals by Heuvelmans, in the chapter about the possibility of surviving mammoths, there is in their map, there's one or two places where it is claimed there are surviving woolly mammoths in Siberia.
Woolly mammoths?
Not woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos. Yeah.
I've personally never heard of an account of a surviving woolly rhino. It'd be great if they were still around.
I've never heard of an account, but Heuvelmans put one or two images on the map showing all the different claims of woolly mammoths, which had woolly rhinos in. Look at your copy when you go home.
Yeah.
Because I've always wondered about that. It's always seemed to me to be an oversight on Heuvelmans' part. Whilst we're on the subject, what do you think about the surviving woolly mammoth?
Well, woolly mammoths were not creatures of the forest. They were creatures of the steppe, open grasslands with sparse trees, and they used the big tusks like snow ploughs to scrape the snow out of the way to get to the sedges and grasses that they ate. So most of the supposed mammoth sightings have been from the Russian taiga, the forest. So if there's anything to them, they're more likely to be mastodons, which were forest animals rather than mammoths. But once again, they're so few and far between, they're not very high up on the list of things I think that are likely.
My thoughts have been that as man-made anthropogenic climate change has been a thing now for at least 150 years, if not longer, I think that slowly some of the permafrost has been melting, and that the stories of perfectly preserved frozen mammoths have become warped by Siberian whispers into the idea that the creature actually survives as a living entity.
Well, originally they thought that when they found the thawed out remains of mammoths, they thought that they were subterranean burrowing creatures that died when they came to the surface.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they thought they were some sort of giant rodent with huge teeth that came to the surface and died, because a lot of them were missing their trunks when they were found. And they were just this big hairy mass with two white prongs sticking out of it, and they thought that they were giant subterranean rodents.
Well, I may be talking nonsense, it has been known, but I read somewhere that the words marmot, M-A-R-M-O-T, and mammoth, M-A-M-M-O-T-H, have the same root.
I don't know. I've never heard of that.
Because mammoth means mountain of meat. So we've talked about the Javan rhino. What about mainland populations of the Sumatran rhino?
Well, it's more or less the same cattle or fish as the Javan rhino. If they're going to be anywhere, they're going to be somewhere like Burma, somewhere where it's very undisturbed and there's a lot of rainforest and not a lot of people go there.
You mean the People's Republic of Myanmar?
It will always be Burma, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, it's funny, the last person who said that to me was when I wrote an article that Myanmar was the late unlamented Simon Wollstonecraft. He said, I will not call it Myanmar because I don't like the government. I said, well, I don't like the British government. Does that mean we're not going to have to call it Albion?
Yeah, Albion's a nice name.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another show. I hope you enjoyed it, because it's been quite a strange trip from a bipedal fox to surviving rare, if not extirpated species of rhinoceros, to the survival, or possibly survival, of various species of mammoths. And I have our producer Louis here on the other side of my iPad. Louis, what do you think about mammoths?
John, young people don't care about mammoths. The only time we care about mammoths is when Queen Latifah played Ellie in Ice Age 2, which was a gripping and thrilling movie saga.
I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. However, I do, believe it or not, have a Queen Latifah record somewhere. I bet you weren't expecting me to say that.
Oh no, cringe.
Oh God. Why do I have to put up with this nonsense from the younger generation? And that actually is the end of the show. And I want to say a big thank you to Graham, who, as well as being one of my oldest friends, is the Deputy Director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology and also my carer, and the guy who pushes me into our car twice a week, 3 times a week this week, in order to take me and my wheelchair to Bideford District Hospital for them to do arcane things to my feet. I want to say a big thank you to my producer, Louis, who's somebody I am very fond of, and he does a bloody good job despite the fact that I take the piss out of him on a number of occasions, usually at least once an episode. I want to say a big thank you to Daisy Swann, to Richard Freeman, and to everybody else who helped. I'll be back again on Saturday, and so if you're watching this, McCrinnan, I'll be Seeing you.